Welcome back to the Adam Kramer Show, where we ask, analyze, and argue about the hottest pro-life topics. Today, I am pleased to welcome back Myah Abraham, founder of GreatLife Teens, and I'm very pleased to introduce Lily Cole to the Adam Kramer Show. How are you doing today, Lily?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Oh yeah, we are excited to have you as well. So Lily, just starting off, we start off every episode like this. Would you mind telling us a little bit about why you're pro-life?
Why I'm pro-life? Well, I grew up Christian. My dad was a pastor, and I grew up in the church, and that really created a foundation for me that believes that God is the author and giver of life, because I have a fundamental belief that you can't be a Christian and also be pro-choice, because our Christianity necessarily bleeds into what we believe politically. But on a personal level, why I'm pro-life is because I've seen the emotional effects of abortion on women. I mean, I've talked to women who haven't been healed, who after 14 years or something, they realize what they did is wrong. And then 15 years after that, they're still healing from the traumatic effects that abortion has on people emotionally. And so not only am I against it physically, because I do believe that a child is, a child from the moment of conception, but also on the standpoint of protecting women from emotional effects that abortion has.
Right. And especially, same thing for me, the Catholic upbringing with the knowledge that life is given by God and it can only be given and taken away by God. Right. So Myah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to talk with you all today, and I wanted to touch on something like Lily had said about like the way abortion affects women. It's so crucial that women know how abortion is affecting them. So I think that's a really, really important point to us as pro-lifers, because we're not here just fighting for the baby. And Adam, I know you talked about this. Yes, we want to save the baby. Yes, that's such a precious human life we want to save, but we want to save the women. We want to save the fathers. We want to save the culture. So yeah, that's so important.
Right. And it affects women whether or not you've had an abortion or not. Like if you've had an abortion, it affects you, but also it affects the entire community surrounding you. We talked about that with Juan Pablo in the Communion of Persons podcast episode. Mm-hmm. I think that was episode 3.
Actually, something interesting that I just thought of. Okay, so when a woman has a miscarriage, she obviously wants that child. She wants the baby. Then the baby dies, and she grieves over that. That's something that's completely and utterly heartbreaking. And then they say, oh, abortion, you won't grieve the loss of the tissue. Well, why in a miscarriage does the woman always grieve? It's, their argument that they say, oh, it's based on if you want the child or not. That's the qualifying factor for what the child is worth, whether the mom wants it or not, whether the mom wants to grieve for it or not. But when it's an unintentional death, they grieve regardless. So I think that's a really interesting point that we have to bring up as pro-lifers when we're going into this this playing field and chessboard of arguments. We need to say, hey, but why, when the woman wants the baby, does she grieve? But also why, when she doesn't want the baby necessarily, she also grieves. So you have to kind of ask the right questions.
Right. And you have to see that, no matter what, we know from abortion witnesses that you grieve, that like it is damaging to you emotionally. We talked about that with Amanda. But today, what we're talking about is ultrasounds. So I want to get into how ultrasounds, it changed abortion, because with an ultrasound, you're able to see what's going on. You're able to see exactly what's happening. And this is also something for Abby Johnson too. She was able to see not only the ultrasound, but, the remains of the unborn child. We saw that in the movie Unplanned. We've seen that in her book. And so that was also another thing. Ultrasounds have really been the main cause for abortionist conversion. So we also know that Dr. Bernard Nathanson was mainly converted. One of the most, thought-provoking conversions that he's had was from the ultrasound. So he was given the opportunity to see an abortion through an ultrasound, and he was able to use ultrasound for the abortion. And he quickly realized that, that even though you can call it a clump of cells, you can call it just, tissue or something like that, or a parasite, it's a human life. And you can see that especially with Abby Johnson, I think it was interesting to note how in the first chapter of her book, in the first section, like she saw the fetus, the child in the womb, struggling, trying to get away from the tube. And so that's something that it really brings back the fact that this is a life. It is independent from the woman, and it is not only part of the woman's body, but it is a separate life. So when you take it away, it is taking away the life of a child, an innocent child of God, and it is, harming the woman.
Exactly. And I think that's something so integral to what we're realizing here, like what we're talking about at the beginning, is women have that right to know, right, what is going on in their bodies. And we necessarily need to give them that opportunity by giving them that chance at the ultrasound. Bernard Nathanson, he was more informed when he saw the ultrasound. It was new technology. So the ultrasound really, really came out, was accessible to people a few months after Roe v. Wade was passed in 1973. It was I don't remember the exact date, but that was when it started becoming really accessible that year. And when he and the lady that he was doing the ultrasound saw the baby girl in the womb, and he said that the baby smiled at him, like he could see the baby smile, even with the technology like that they had then, and he heard the heartbeat. But not only did he hear the heartbeat, he saw like the heartbeat, and that was what changed his mind, made him think, what am I doing? And that child was not aborted because both him and the mom realized in that moment that this is not something we can continue doing. This is not something that I can follow through with, because he saw the humanity of the child. Ultrasound necessarily changes the way society sees the unborn child. As Christians, we're called to have faith even if we can't see. But ultrasound is giving us that opportunity to see, to touch, touch the wounds of Jesus. Like, it's giving us the opportunity to see the child in the womb, and it changes science completely. And that's what it did for Bernard Nathanson. And it's such a power, like the way he tells the story is so powerful, but it has to change. It changes our narrative as a society when we can see the child in the womb.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, because whenever you're arguing with someone our age, Gen Z, they're going to use the argument that it's a clump of cells. But if you look at any activist, any Planned Parenthood person, like who's up at the top, when they go on TV, they don't use that argument anymore. You're going to hear it's about a woman's right, and that we believe that an unwanted pregnancy is worthy to be destroyed, right? They don't actually really say, oh, it's a clump of cells, because it's been so completely disproven using the ultrasound machine. So it's not an argument Margaret Sanger used at the beginning in the 1920s, when they didn't really have very good technology. And so, we need to wait for that. We need to, wait for that to trickle down to people who are our age, because the amount of girls that I talk to who still think that argument, and I'm like, well, you'd be surprised to know it's totally been disproven. So we can see that now the argument for people who are up at the top, the executives who aren't using the clump of cells, it's turned into a woman's right. And they're not even denying that it's not murder anymore. They're just saying it's a type of murder that's okay. And we need to take it upon ourselves to expose that, because it's up to as low as 3 weeks, they can test if a heartbeat is there using maybe not an ultrasound machine, but a different type of machine that is a little more personal.
And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, the women that aren't science is trying to hide the fact that that ultrasound has disproven this clump of cells argument. And so women, when they go in for their abortions, are still being told it's a clump of cells. Listen, the workers at Planned Parenthood are being told this, and probably believe this. This is what Abby Johnson believed until she walked into that room and saw the ultrasound. And like Lily said, it's our job to expose it, to show forth the ultrasound, which is why it's important that women have the option to have to have an ultrasound before an abortion. It should be a requirement of Planned Parenthood. And certain states have looked at passing laws like this, and some states have.
Yes, there are, I think as of September 2020, there are 26 states that require ultrasounds before abortion.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's incredible because that's what's going to, prove human life in the womb is a human life. Because when you're not able to see it, when you're not able to see the child there in the womb, not only is it, so much easier to, get rid of, but it's so much easier to be detached from, and it's so much easier to deny that it is a human life.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
getting into the analyze section, I want to talk about how maybe we could get ultrasounds to be, how are ultrasounds going to continue to change the abortion argument from the pro-life side and from the pro-choice side?
If I could jump in just first and just say two things. I feel like ultrasound, while it's been amazing for us, it has been this double-edged sword because of the ultrasound, we can see problems with the child in the womb. Everything from Down syndrome to just every health problem they're going to have. Ultrasound has allowed us to see this. Now, that should not change the fact that it's a human life. It should not change the fact that we should kill this child because they have Down syndrome. But it's allowed us to see the imperfections, per se, of the child in the womb. And it has sadly increased the amount of abortions because people have seen, and what country is it that
Sweden.
Sweden, yes, Sweden. Almost 100% of their children with Down syndrome are aborted, and so that is
they mask it as we have no Down syndrome at all, and that's because of sport.
Exactly. And there was, it was in the front page of the World magazine in December. It was Sweden has found the cure to Down syndrome, and they're killing their children with abortion. So I think that's first something we need to analyze and talk about is how can we fight against that? And then the second thing about ultrasound is it is, like I was saying right before, is utilizing it to shut down our Planned Parenthoods, utilizing the fact that we need to give women, first of all, that 24-hour period, at least 24-hour period. And because when you give them that 24-hour period, what you're doing is, first, you're requiring the Planned Parenthood to have the doctor on site at least 2 days, and Planned Parenthoods can't necessarily afford that. Especially smaller Planned Parenthoods cannot afford to have a doctor on campus or at the office 2 days a week, which goes to show who are the people running Planned Parenthoods. They're not doctors.
Not doctors.
And half of them aren't even nurses. And then the second thing is, it gives women that time to think about their decision. And that's why, blue buses outside of Planned Parenthoods that offer women free ultrasounds. I was there at Planned Parenthood one time, and we asked this woman to just go try this blue bus, and she went in and she saw the twins. She ended up being pregnant with twins, and she decided to keep her children because of the blue bus outside of Planned Parenthood. So anyway, I think those are two things that need to be analyzed in that section.
Right. And we can see how ultrasound has helped out both sides of this, if you want to see it as helping for the pro-choice argument. So with that, how can we convince the world that, yes, these ultrasounds are showing us all these different things, but how do we bring it back to, every human life is sacred? How can we use ultrasound to prove that?
I think the first thing, I always talk about this whenever I'm talking to a lot of older Republicans, and I say, look, you need to be taking it upon yourself to not complain about people, because when you talk fondly about the ideas that you want to advance, then you'll be able to advance them with kindness and cheerfulness, because those things are infectious, right? And we all, as conservatives, as Christians, whatever, we all have the tendency to complain about people, to complain about things, to complain about ideas. So the most practical thing that I foresee is us talking about how wonderful little babies are. We need to be talking about how sweet children with Down syndrome are. We need to be making room and making space for children that have disabilities. We need to be actually being the hands and feet of Jesus in that way, because one, that's what we're called to do as Christians, but two, that's going to show other people that we really are the side of being pro-love. I mean, they tell us, that we're judgmental hypocrites, we're racist and stuff, when we know that we're not. We know that we're very nice people most of the time, and we know that we want to do the right thing. So the best thing you can do is start talking fondly about children, start loving kids, and really just like show that love wherever you are, because leading by example is the most powerful thing we can do.
Right. And I think that, when we start doing that, that's when that's like paving the new path forward for future generations. Getting people excited, like Myah talked about, I think in like the first episode, getting people excited about life, how great it is. I mean, that's like one of the meanings of the GreatLife Teens name. How great is life that we get to live it and that God gives it to us, Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. And Myah, oh, sorry, were you talking?
No.
Okay. To go along with the waiting period thing, I'm reading here that 25 states require a woman seeking an abortion to wait a specific period of time, usually 24 hours, between when she receives counseling and the procedure is performed. 12 of these states have laws that effectively require women to make 2 separate trips to the clinic to obtain the procedure. So one for the ultrasound, one for the procedure. And I think that's really good. So another thing we need to be doing, I always talk about this. On Saturday, I was at lunch with one of our state reps. This morning, I'm calling one of our senators, and y'all, their phone numbers are literally on a website. If they're your state reps, they're state senators, you have access to them. You probably live within less than 45 minutes from at least a Senate and a House office. Go in, go talk to them, go say, hey, I want to put this waiting period in. Get with your state right to life group. They probably will want to push for that too if you don't have it. Maybe you want to amend it, increase the waiting period. Maybe you want to put in what this law that one of the 12 states have. Make your voice known. I mean, soon enough, we won't even be able to have free speech. So we might as well use it while we have it to accomplish the things that we know are in line with the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And going back to what Lily was saying earlier, we were talking about this in our class at church on Sunday. We were talking about convincing versus conviction. Mm-hmm. So we will change the world more by the conviction that we have for Christ, more by the conviction we have for life, than by sitting there trying to convince people. Because people are more changed by the person you present yourself to be, the joyful person you present yourself to be. And I think that's so those words, conviction versus convincing, are so integral here. Is we're called to, we should not be ashamed of our conviction for Christ, for life. And when people see that, they're like, what do these people have? How do these people have this joy? And I want that joy. I want to be, I like, they're interested in, but if someone were to be like, you have this hobby and like they're super into it and it's super awesome, you're like, ooh, that's kind of cool, maybe I should be a part of this. But then if they're like, you should make this your favorite thing, you should do this, then you're like, I don't really know if I want to be, like part of that, right? And so I think that's something super integral here. And so, like being that example, like Lily being that example of, talking to senators, of having lunches with people closest to you, your senators closest to you. You don't need to reach the president. You don't need to reach, the Supreme Court. You need to reach the people closest to you. And maybe through them, you will reach further.
Yeah, no, in fact, I always say, I'm like, look, everybody's outraged at the White House all the time. They're never going to see your tweet. They don't care. You're not doing anything. At least be outraged and channel your outrage toward your state or local governments, because there you can actually make your voice heard. And I think it's really funny because it's such a cop-out thing to do. It's just like using the rape and incest argument to justify the other 99% of abortions, saying, I'm going to get mad at the White House, that top 1% of people who actually work there, because I don't want to deal with everything that's leading up to that local, state, and then to the federal government. So it's just being lazy and using that 1% to, getting angry at that 1% or using that to justify the other 99%.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. So I was just gonna say, like, that's again going to getting Roe v. Wade, out of here, because that will get it back to the states where it really matters. Because at the White House, that's not exactly where it matters. It matters in the state representation, just like you're saying. So if you look at the smaller government, that's really what, affects stuff. The White House, it's more broad and stuff like that. And, it's the anti-federalist position that, smaller government, we want smaller government. So I think that getting Roe v. Wade to focus back on how abortion should be legislated by the states and not by the federal government, that's another way that we can, get Roe v. Wade overturned, by seeing that, state representation is what's going to change this.
Yeah, exactly. And, just bringing that back to ultrasound, that's why it's so important for us to push to ultrasound, for us to go to our smaller, to our state government, to just push the ultrasound, us here on the ground, because we're sitting here telling women, we're sitting here saying, we need to have this, we need to have that. But if we do nothing about it, no one else knows anything about it. If they don't see us convicted for this, if they don't see us pushing for this, then what change are other people going to want to have? We have to be that change. We have to push for that change, because no woman is going to go out of her way when she's already feeling so awful about her life, and then she's going to be like, oh yeah, now I'm going to go find a way to get an ultrasound, and I have to do this. And if our job isn't, we don't want to make their lives harder. Our job as pro-lifers is we want to bring the joy back to life. And so because of that, we're called to go to our local government, to go to not even our local government, to go to people who can help provide those ultrasounds. And that's what the Blue Bus has done. The Blue Bus is, they have, and the people, a part of it, have pushed to have ultrasounds as a requirement at these Planned Parenthoods, but they also know that their job is to give women that opportunity before they walk in, even if they can't convince their local government to the state to require that ultrasound, because they're there as that option, as that story, as that opportunity for that woman.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's really important too that, one, we are updated on the process of adoption and foster care, because that is technically an alternative. Two, that we understand, because one of the main arguments is, oh, but having a baby is so expensive and abortion is so cheap. Well, statistically, I've seen two different statistics. One of them is big, one of them is little, but they're still valid. One statistic says there are 36 couples per every baby that's born. And then another says there's 8. So regardless, that's a lot of people ready to take in a baby as soon as they're born. And luckily, the mom doesn't have to pay for any of the hospital trip, any of the insurance, if she gets connected with one of those families before. So that immediately dismantles the argument that these children are unwanted. They are very, very, very wanted. But then at the same time, I've seen a lot of specifically older Republicans being like, all abortion, ban or nothing. We have to go this black and white, and I'm not going to support any legislation if it's not a total federal abortion ban. And that is not practical. That is not helpful. That is not productive. And so we need to take it upon ourselves to learn how legislation works practically, learn the loopholes. We got to make ourselves our own little lawyers if we want to start promoting this kind of stuff, because just like the heartbeat bill or the waiting period bill, that will shut down so many Planned Parenthoods, which will limit the amount of abortions that are happening. And that is a good thing. So we need to have a comprehensive knowledge of what legislation will actually be effective, and then what is the practical application of the legislation that we're talking to our state reps and our senators about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So it looks like we're going to be getting into the argument section here, but first I wanted to just as a final point for the ultrasound analyzation and stuff like that. We had Terry Beatley on here last week, and she was phenomenal. She laid it out so plainly of how Dr. Bernard Nathanson's story is going to be the story to convince others that abortion is wrong, horribly evil. And so I just wanted to remind you that you can go over to abortionking.com and you can order your copy of her book, What If We've Been Wrong? Keeping My Promise to America's Abortion King. This book is phenomenal. We're going to be doing a book club on this. I think it's Tuesdays. And so on Tuesdays, we're going to be doing book clubs. You can tune in on Tuesdays, and we'll be going through a couple chapters at a time. And when you go to abortionking.com, you can use the code GLTeens at checkout to get 5% off your order.
Okay,
and so
and everything.
I know,
Wow.
right? Moving up. And so you can use the code GLTeens for 5% off the order. And not only does that benefit your education of Dr. Bernard Nathan's story, but you can also support us through that, because a large majority of the profits will come to us. So we can keep having podcasts like this, and, you know, the Sam Burns Show, all that stuff going on with GreatLife. And I would highly recommend this book. Also, if you have the chance, you should definitely pick up the little fact checker book that we were looking at last time. That is just the easiest thing, pocket friendly. You can just carry that around and convince any pro-choicer about this stuff. It just lays out the information in such a consumable way that also shows you exactly where they went wrong.
Wow.
So getting into the arguing section, Lily, so I think Myah's been on the show before, so we're going to have you argue with me. Did you want to argue from the pro-life side or the pro-choice side?
Let's do pro-choice. I'll go pro-choice.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think that's actually a second, because Sam Byrne did it, and then here we are. It was really funny last time when I tried to argue pro-life. So let's go. So
okay.
Do you want me to try to convince you of something, or do you want to convince me of something?
You convince me and I'll combat you. How about that?
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to be using points that we've talked about here, specifically centered around the ultrasound and stuff like that. So through the use of ultrasound, we are able to see the child in the womb. We're able to see that not only is it not just a clump of cells, but it is human. There is human form to it. So I don't think that it's right for us to be able to say that it's women's healthcare to kill that human being.
Well, what I would say to that is define human, because there's a difference between personhood and what qualifies you to live in this world, as opposed to just being able to form sometime in the future into a person, because everybody has stages of development and you're not fully functioning until you can function outside of the womb. And so as a pro-choicer, I'm not for third trimester abortion, because there are instances where children are able, when they come outside, are able to, with a little bit of medical help, be able to live. But I'm for those first up to 6 weeks, right? Because I'm arguing from a pro-choice standpoint where it's dependent on the definition of personhood. So if you define personhood for me and how that is different than a life, I would love that.
Well, so I know that there's many arguments that, it might not look like a child, or it might not, be able to function completely as a child. But just because we have the ultrasound to be able to see that doesn't mean that they're not that way. It doesn't mean that we can say exactly when they become a human or when they become, viable outside of the womb, or when, but we do know that as a Christian and as a pro-lifer, I believe that life begins at conception, because no matter what, from then on, that child will continue to progress the way God wants it to. And so I think that's when the human argument comes in, because, you can't kill something that's going to potentially be a human, because it's already a human in my point of view. But for you, I don't think that killing something that has the potential to become a human, again, from your point of view, I don't know that that's exactly should be allowed legally.
Yeah, but I mean, you even said it there. You said it has the potential to be. I have the potential to be a rock star, but that doesn't mean I'm actually going to go be that, right? Potential is a very important topic. And, from a scientific standpoint, something is not classified as something else when it has the potential to be that. I mean, a caterpillar has the potential to be a butterfly. And I honestly, person to person, I don't know if they're classified differently, but for the sake of my argument, I'm going to argue that they are classified in a different phylum or kingdom or whatever. But a caterpillar is different than a butterfly. And I would say that a caterpillar is less valuable than a butterfly because butterflies are beautiful and functional in the world. They pollinate stuff. Caterpillars just eat leaves and kind of destroy the land. Similarly, like a little clump of cells in a woman that is eating her nutrition, that's making her bloat up, that's making her maybe have morning sickness. A lot of times women have a lot of what's it called? There's some kind of diabetes that you can get while you have a clump of cells that's inside of you, that an egg that's been fertilized. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so I would argue, since so many things could go wrong and it can have such a negative effect on the woman themselves, that the potential of it being a child is something that we should be allowed to eliminate, solely because, one, it will hurt the woman a lot of times and cause her major discomfort. Two, she probably doesn't want that. I hate saying this. She probably doesn't want that child because a lot of pregnancies are unplanned. And two, it's not become a person yet, because as you qualified, it still has the potential. So it hasn't reached its full definition of what I believe a human is.
If I could jump in. Sorry, Adam.
No, go ahead, Myah. No, you go ahead.
Okay, so my first question for you would be, what if, let's say, a mom had a kid and then, like, when they're 2 years old, the mom feels sick and she can't really take care of the child. Does that mom have a right to get rid of the child?
What do you mean, get rid of the child?
Does the mom have the right to kill the 2-year-old child?
Is the 2-year-old child causing her to be sick?
Sure.
How would that be?
Well, let's just say the mom is sick and has no means to take care of the 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old would, let's see, the 2-year-old is causing her to have to go to work even though she's sick and she can't do that. Does that mom have the is she legally able to kill? Should she be legally able to kill her child?
No, because the 2-year-old is a fully functioning person outside of the woman. Now,
would you agree with me that the 2-year-old still depends on the mother? Could the 2-year-old live without the mother giving them food, without the mother providing for them?
Some instances possibly, but generally I think you want me to say no.
And now would you agree with me, like, that 2-year-old still has the opportunity to develop and still has the opportunity to grow, right?
Yes, but they've already reached the baseline of what it means to be a human. I know you're trying to work me back and say, oh, people.
So what's the baseline? What's the baseline?
Being able to, let's think. I'll go with heartbeat.
Okay, perfect. Now, when does the heartbeat begin?
At the latest, we can detect it from 7 weeks. And then after that, you can get it with a regular ultrasound. But then before that, I think it goes as little to 3 or 4 weeks with a different kind of ultrasound.
Let's say 8 weeks is when we can detect the heartbeat.
Okay.
Sure. Let's agree that we can both agree that the heartbeat might start at about 8 weeks, correct?
Sure.
Okay. So can we agree that it would be wrong to abort the child up to 8 weeks? After 8 weeks, it would be wrong.
After 8 weeks, yes. Before that, again, the child has not reached a place of viable personhood. Therefore, we can do what we need to and what is necessary with it, because they haven't reached a place where they're on an equal playing field as the mother, who is a fully functioning person who probably, has clearly gone through puberty and, or any stage after that.
Perfect. So do we know the exact moment when the heart begins to beat?
I'm sure you could detect it if you had an ultrasound going for like 6 weeks straight.
Okay. And so, like, even like before you were pregnant, like you'd probably have to detect from that point on, like from the moment you became pregnant, to figure out when the heartbeat started exactly, correct?
No, because if you have a regular ultrasound from the outside, there are stages of the child's development where you can't actually detect that it's a heartbeat.
Sure.
Right? It should be a heartbeat should be something that is able to be heard through a regular ultrasound from the outside when they put the little gel on their skin, right?
Sure.
And it shouldn't be something that we have to get so close to detect it, because it's kind of like a Horton hears a who thing. You know, he had to get so close to that little little fluffy thing to detect that there were people in there. But, you know, like they were so little that nobody else would know that person. So it wouldn't really affect anyone if they squashed it.
So would you agree with me then that we're simply waiting on the heartbeat to begin, right? To have a baseline of personhood, correct?
Yeah, a heartbeat contingent on being heard from an external ultrasound.
Sure. And so, so you would agree with me then that this is an argument of development. We're waiting for the heartbeat to develop, correct?
No, it's an argument of the line of viability. It's where we find that line and when do they officially cross that line. I mean, every year you have a birthday and officially you gain 1 year under your seatbelt. And
sure. So, but you would agree with me then that we are waiting for the child to develop that heartbeat to cross that line of viability in your terms.
What do you mean by we are waiting?
So,
like legislation?
So from the moment of conception, you know, we're waiting for them to have a heartbeat for them to be viable in your terms, correct?
I guess technically, yes.
So you would, sorry.
No, yeah. So you'd be able to, you'd say it's okay to kill the child anytime before the heart starts to beat, or before we can detect it, at least.
So that line of viability is a waiting process of age, correct?
Say that one more time.
So that line of viability is us waiting for that child to become older, basically.
I mean, you have to wait to be able to get there. So essentially, yes. However, I will submit to you as a person who is pro-choice that as our technology advances, as you said, we're able to detect a lot of mental illnesses or physical disabilities in a child, and we are able to hear a heartbeat from an external ultrasound closer and closer and closer to conception. But I think there's always still going to be that period in between conception of, you know, when you did the thing and when you can actually hear a heartbeat outside of it. And so that may shrink, that window may shrink, and therefore the line will shrink, but it's never going to be at the beginning because you can't sense a heartbeat from the very beginning.
So you would agree then that it's basically what we would call like age discrimination, right? Because we're waiting for that child to become older for them to develop that heartbeat, right? Because inherently, can we agree that inherently we've all agreed that they have the potential to be they have the potential to be a viable human being, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so from the moment of conception, and so if they are in essence human, what are we waiting? We're waiting on them to become older, to become 3 weeks old, for that heartbeat to develop, and thus we're waiting for them to grow in age.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I don't agree for the reason of something that has potential has not been assigned an age yet. For example, I have two examples. If you buy a car and the car pieces have a lifetime, but they don't become a car until it's fully assembled and on the lot, right? And then you say, my car is 5 years old. It's 5 years old from the day that it was put on the lot, completely formed and new. Other example is a tree. You can measure the age of a tree by the loops that are on the trunk. And you can't get any of those loops until the tree sprouts out of the ground and starts to blossom. And that's how you can start measuring it. You can't measure how many loops are on a seed. And you also can't measure the age of a car based on how old the parts are, but how old the whole construction is.
Sure.
And so I would argue that age begins when the full construction, meaning the most integral part, which is your heartbeat, actually enters the whole picture.
Cool. So what are the pieces of a child?
Lots of things.
What are the pieces that we're putting together that make it into a child? What in essence makes it a child?
It's heartbeat, because heartbeat is the sign of life.
Okay.
And so sorry.
Yeah, no.
Totally going over time.
Definitely. But
we are.
So I just want to say, going back to something you said about heartbeat, and we're able to detect it earlier and earlier thanks to our developing technology. So how do we really know when the heartbeat begins if it just keeps getting earlier and earlier that we can detect it? Do you think it's, okay to kill a child even though we might not know exactly when the heartbeat begins?
I would say that since we are not able to detect it, then we shouldn't worry about it, right? As our technology progresses, we will get sooner and sooner about detecting when the heartbeat begins, but still that qualifies when they pass the viability test in a pro-choicer standpoint. So I say even before that, we shouldn't even worry about it, because even if you did take them out of the womb, they would not be able to survive, and it's not really affecting that many people.
So should a surgeon, if they're giving a surgery and they don't know when know something about the person might die if they don't know like the heartbeat, or if they don't know something in the surgery, should the surgeon just be like, it's fine, like would you trust that surgeon if they're like, it's fine, like we don't really know when this thing happens, but we should still do this thing.
Most surgeries are performed on people who are already viable and already, hopefully are generally like 85% working, right? The reason you get surgeries is because one part of you is insufficient. That's why you go get your oil changed in your car. And so it's not even really the same playing field, because you're operating on a fully functioning person as opposed to something that is only in the developmental stages. If my car, the bumper got twisted or something on the product line, well, I wouldn't go and dissect the tire because I wanted to fix the bumper. You have to deal with the parts accordingly, but then as they cross that threshold of becoming viable, that's when things start working together. And I submit to you and agree that after the heartbeat starts working, that's when the whole body works together in harmony.
Sure.
But anytime before that, there's no harmonious working together.
So what about like the government, or the United States government, innocent till proven guilty? Should we either first assume that the child has so like we said, we don't necessarily know exactly that moment when the heartbeat begins, and should we either assume first that the heartbeat began, that the person is a human being, before the heartbeat, or and that we should not kill them, or like even if we to the heartbeat, without the heartbeat, no. If we don't know when the heartbeat starts, should we just be able to kill the child? Should we say, you know what, the heartbeat, guilty, like that, there's no heartbeat, I don't think there's a heartbeat, so I'm going to kill this child? Should we first assume that there is a heartbeat? Should we first assume that it is a human life before if we don't have a technology enough to show that heartbeat, as we develop technology to show that there is a heartbeat either from the moment of conception, or that it is a human life from the moment of conception, to show that there's something more integral to just the heartbeat in the human life? Should we make that assumption? Is that right of a surgeon? Is that right of a doctor to say, I don't know if that's a human life, but I'm going to kill it? Or would it be better for us to say, that's probably a human life, or that may be a human life, and because of that, I cannot kill it?
I get what you're asking, and I would have to argue no. The reason is because, again, the criminal justice system, where the principle of innocent till proven guilty comes from, is based upon dealing with real viable people, one, but then two, it's pretty much like being like, oh, well, I want to get a vaccine. And a lot of times vaccines, specifically say the COVID vaccine, has been really, really, really rushed. And it's not something that we should just assume is innocent until people start dying because they get the COVID vaccine. I've seen too many TikToks of moms, their kids waking up in the morning and their mom is dead because they got the COVID vaccine. So I think for everything, we need to have the ability to critically think about it and wait till it has been proven innocent, because essentially the burden of proof is on the person who's trying to argue. So just like I'm not going to get the COVID vaccine, I'm not going to agree that it is a child before scientifically they've even crossed the threshold of harmonious personhood.
Okay, and let's bring that back to the word scientifically. So we're talking scientifically here. Now, there are people who use machines, right, to keep their heart beating, that are in the hospitals, that are have machines that keep their heart beating. Now, that person cannot keep their own heart beating, like that body cannot keep their own heart beating, correct? Is that still a person? Is that still a viable person?
Nope.
Why not?
Because their heart is not beating. And if they need assistance to keep that heart beating, then, they've forfeited their own personhood by eating too much sugar or salt.
Okay, what if it's a medical condition that they were born with?
That stinks. It really stinks.
This is so hard.
I have to go wash my mouth out after this. This is like,
oh my goodness.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was crazy. You can see how like it can go on and on forever. It's just like it's just crazy how nobody can agree when life begins.
Yeah. Wow. That was, And I even felt myself being like, oh, wait, this would be really good to say, because I can force a distinction between these two things. I think the biggest thing that my strategy was there is not to obviously attack you, Myah, not to, even go down the women's rights thing. It was to conflate terms and make each term quantifiable on something a human can give. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing that they're going to do. Is the big disagreement we have is that quantifiably we look at things and we say, because my whole argument was based off of quality, or life is based off of observable and self-evident factors and self-evident truths. And so we need to be watching out for that, because since we believe that God is the author and giver of life, and a lot of people don't believe in God, they're going to base their perception of what a life is based off of tangible things or audible things like a heartbeat. And so we can work them back so far, but there's always, I really believe that there's always going to be a little bit of dichotomy between what is observable and what is not, because as Christians, we have faith, and that is something unseen that we believe in. And so that was just that was a really interesting thought experiment. So be careful when they conflate terms. One, be careful when they qualify things off of quantitative evidence, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was kind of scary how well you were doing too. Like, I
know. I was like, oh my gosh.
It was crazy. Yeah.
No, it's funny, Myah, because I've talked to you so much that I knew what you were going to say.
I knew that was the thing. Like, I knew you knew what I was going to say. So I knew you had an argument for each thing. And I
know, as soon as you brought up the age discrimination, I was like,
I did not come prepared to debate either, but once you started saying things, I was like,
no, neither did I.
And I was like, oh gosh, I have not studied up on this too long.
That was a really fun exercise, Adam. I encourage everyone to do that. Like, I feel very equipped right now, and
it gives perspective on their side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not only does it give perspective, but it can show you how, like, what arguments they will use to try to get you, and I think that's something that's so accessible to, how this podcast can be accessible to not only pro-lifers, but also pro-choicers, because, we're not, I think one main thing that is like not good about the pro-life movement is those who vilify the pro-choicers. The thing is there are some, we cannot deny that there are some people who do acknowledge that this is murder, and like, they're just totally fine with it. There are those who, know that this is evil, and they still go with it just because, for whatever reason they have. But there are also people who are so uninformed about, or they just don't know the truth about this stuff. And so we have to understand that these people are also coming from a place that we don't know. So if you can find the place where they're coming from, respectfully debate them, and, as Myah keeps saying, bring back the love and the excitement to life, do not vilify these people. They are just, it's what they believe. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I super totally agree with that. I was going to say something, but I forgot it. So.
All right. Myah, any last thoughts for today?
No, I had a lot of fun. I was not even expecting to be on this podcast today. So
I don't think any of us were.
Until like 20 minutes before, I texted Adam. I was like, wait, am I supposed to be on today? And he was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I think
I'm very excited to be here. And I had a lot of fun.
So fun. That was so fun. You should do a whole series on just debates. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sure.
It is lots of fun. And it, like, honestly, every time that I have to argue from the pro-choice side, it is just so annoying. Like, you know exactly what it feels like because you were just doing it.
You're being annoying.
You're being annoying. You're just choosing to bypass.
Lily made me do it one time. Lily made me do it one time for this thing that she was doing, and I was like, I'm going to die. Yeah.
Wait, what?
Anyway, thank you so much, Adam.
Adam, this was so fun.
For that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank y'all. I can't wait to have y'all on some time again. I mean, we know that Myah has been a returning guest. Yes. Hopefully we'll see you again sometime, Lily.
All right. Talk to y'all later.
All right. See you then. Bye.
See y'all. Thank you, Adam. Bye.